Good morning. How are y'all doing? Everybody can hear me in the back? All right. Thank you so much. Today is amazing. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for the word we had this morning. What I took from that was being God-led. I'm from Baltimore, and my grandfather and my mother made sure I was in church every Sunday. So God is very important to me, and I try to keep him in the center of my life. So the next thing I heard was purpose. And each and every one of us here is here for a purpose. The businesses that we run are for a purpose, and next is community, right? Because we are doing this for the community. So my bio has been read. I have been in the industry, we call it the credit union movement, for 18 years. So for 18 years, I started as an intern. And I was, again, from Baltimore City. And while I was starting my career, credit unions, my credit union, MEQ, Baltimore, we were building houses in the community that I lived in, partnering with Habitat for Humanity. And at that moment, I fell in love. And I said that from this moment on, I would be committed to learning everything I could and doing everything I could to make sure that the credit union movement was long-lasting and withstanding so we can help those in our community. And so our motto in credit union is people serving people. Everyone in this building today that has a business, you are serving people, right? So with that being said, I kind of want to ask everybody a question because I've been invited here to talk about the economy. And I just want you to know it's not an interesting topic, but it's one you need to know, okay? And so Abdil gets to hear me once a month. I'm pretty sure he is bored to death, but he smiles at me every time I see him, so it's all good. All right, so I want to ask everybody a question. And the question I want to ask you is, what keeps you up at night? So my good friend Kat is going to go around, and for those of you who would like to share, I hope everyone, because I'm 41, but I do act a little old, and I might call on somebody just because. I also like to hear people laugh too, if that's not too much. All right, so the question is, what keeps you up at night? In this economy, with inflation being high, what keeps you up at night in regards to your business?
Hello, I am Tawny Haynes of Tawny Haynes Apparel. I'm a fashion designer. We design and create amazing apparel for women who lead. I have been in business for 17 years, and I can honestly say what keeps me up is understanding in this climate how to scale my business and also how to grow my business in a way where I'm pulling myself out of my business. I spend a lot of time working in my business, and I really want to spend more time working on my business. So I would say that's the thing that keeps me up the most at night.
Thank you for sharing, yes. That is very important right there. So how to stay in, how to be out and stay in at the same time, right? Who else do we have? Young man and young lady in the back, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Veracruz, my wife, Janet. And so we've recently retired. However, we do have a business on the side. So I'm wondering, and this was relayed to me just the other day, that my pension will be the same 10 years from now. With what's going on, that doesn't look so good to me. So again, as Ms. Tawny mentioned, scaling the business, making it grow, and then exiting out and reaping those benefits.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very important when we're talking about business, right? Once we get into it, we want to have an exit plan that is fruitful to us at the end, what y'all call retirement, our happy space, right, at the end of what we would like to do for our working careers. And so yes, that is a great topic, something I hope, maybe somewhere in here I can answer that during this presentation, and if not, you can always pull me aside. But yes, having that plan and that strategy. Anyone else? I was hoping you would, because you were at the table this morning. Yes, I was hoping.
I think the more that I do business and the more that I go around in the minority entrepreneurship space, and the more that I do business and I free up my time to go and serve the community. What keeps me up at night is how can my business help sound the alarm and bring the same type of knowledge and education. See, other people, they don't worry about recessions because they've been able to prepare. But when we look at the demographics of South Dallas, when we look at our businesses, the structures, the barriers, and the blockages, it's not even access to resources, the resources that are there, it's access to knowledge that they're there and how they can help them. So what keeps me up at night is how can we come together? How can we, one can put 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000, and that's a biblical principle. So how do we initiate that in the marketplace without fear of failure and competition?
Yes, so what you said, what others are doing, it's being recession ready. It's what I call proactive, right? Because we're putting that plan forward and we're putting it together. And plans is kind of like when you wash your clothes, you wash, rinse, and repeat. You are trying to figure out each time, did this work? And then creating something new or either improving upon what you have. So that was a great statement there. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. All right, so I'll make you my last person, and then I will move on.
Hi, my name is Marquette James. I'm the owner of Marquette's Creative Parties and Events and MCP's It's Just Balloons. What keeps me up at night is wondering, how are other people going to know me? I've serviced this many people or this amount of people. Who's my next customer? How are they going to find me? That's what keeps me up at night.
Okay, that's a marketing pull. Where can I market? Who do I market to? Who is my audience and how do I capture? So that's great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you to everyone who shared. I am going to talk about, so first I'd like to do this quote right here. Growth is painful, change is painful, but nothing is as painful as staying stuck where you do not belong. Okay? And so that should be applied to all businesses because if you recall, there are certain businesses from back when that doesn't exist anymore, right? Because they stayed stuck and they did not change. And that's not what we're here for today. So next, we're gonna kind of break down a few things. We're gonna talk about some things that are important to you. So as a CFO, what I do is I pay attention to what's going on in the economy. I need to know nationally what's going on. I need to know locally what's happening here in Texas, more particularly in Dallas, right? Because we serve two counties, Harris County down in Houston and Dallas County here up north. And so I need to be aware of those things and what's happening. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what's going on in the Fed, right? Because the Fed is really making some changes and shifting the atmosphere to kind of what they would call bring us back to neutral. The question that's been floating around for a while is there, will there, or are we currently in a recession? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll touch on, what is the optimism of small businesses currently in this environment? All right. And then also we'll go over some resources. So the next slide, we're going to talk about some factors. And so from business school, what we learn is there is 4 different phases of the business cycles, right? There is the expansion cycle, there's the peak cycle. Once you have gotten through the whole growth period, you have reached a peak. And then from there's a contraction. That's when things start to slow down and get a little tighter before we are led into a recession. And so if we can go to the next slide. So first things first, we want to talk about unemployment. So unemployment as of June, May is 3.7, and Texas is at 4.1. For the US, when we think about unemployment is let me rephrase that. Unemployment, when we look at employment, full employment is considered around 5%, right? And so as you can see, we're well under that, meaning that there is employment, there are jobs out there, correct? And so household employment dropped by 310,000 in May, following 139,000 increase from the month prior. With 130,000 increase in the labor force, the unemployment rate did rise by 0.3%. point, and as you can see, from 3.4 to 3.7. Now, that was actually more than was expected. They expected 3.5. We talk about GDP. GDP stands for the gross domestic product. And so GDP actually was revised. This is something that gets revised a few times in the quarters. It was actually revised from 1.3% gain to a 2% gain on the annual basis in the first quarter report. The 2% gain follows a 2.6 increase in the fourth quarter and marks the weakest quarterly pace since second quarter of 2022. So from there, when we talk about GDP, GDP is looking at the consumption of goods, right? And so goods consumption, however, was revised a little bit lower from 6.3 to 6%. And so we have, on the other side of goods, is services. And then you have services consumption, which was actually revised up from 2.5, which is an increase, from 2.5, which is an increase to 3.2 as a gain. And so I'm sharing that with you because these are things that the Fed are looking at. So we have the annual inflation of 4.05%. So if you are watching the news, whether it's CNN or Fox News or whatever it is, you hear that the Fed is trying to combat inflation. And so inflation is that lovely thing when we go to the stores to purchase something, the increase in prices. And so at one point, this was much higher than this beginning of last year, or second half of last year. And as you could recall, the Fed started to take rates up that second half of last year to kind of bring this down. And as you can see, it's at 4.5. They would like to have it around 2%, the target rate. And so they do have some ways to go, and we'll talk some more about the Fed a little bit later. Consumer confidence. How confident are consumers these days to go out and readily go and get the goods and services that we're providing? And that's about 109.7, and that's from June. It was an increase from May from 102.5. And so when we're talking about this, we're talking about whether or not the consumer has the confidence. As you can see, there was an increase, so therefore there is. And then we have the NFIB, small business optimism. How optimistic are small businesses in this current environment? That actually increased. It went from 89 to 89.4. So it's a small increase, and we'll get into a little bit more details in a few slides about that as well. All right, so next we're going to talk about PPI. So PPI it measures the average change over time in the prices domestic producers receive for their output. It measures inflation at a wholesale level. And so here you can see the graph and where you would see two items. You see the PPI, well, you see three, but we're going to stick with the two. PPI, and you see core PPI. The difference between the two is that core PPI excludes food and energy, okay? And as you can see on the slide, it says the PPI showed further improvement in inflation, boosting optimism that the Fed is nearing the end of its tightening cycle. It rose to 0.1% in June on an annual basis, the slowest pace in nearly 3 years, excluding food and energy. The core PPI rose 0.1 in June and 2.4 from this time last year. Okay. If we go to our next slide, this one here is CPI. Now CPI, and then when we look at CPI, that is also a measurement, but it's a measurement of the percent change of the prices of goods, a basket of goods and services that is consumed by households. So you're probably wondering, well, Tracey, why are you talking about PPI and CPI, and then next I'll get to PCE. I'm talking about these because these are items that affect consumers, which all of us are consumers, but they're also consumers who are investing in your businesses. They're coming and they're purchasing from you. So it's important that we know what this represents. And so for CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, rose 0.1% in May, as expected, following the 0.4% gain in April. Year over year, consumer price rose 4%, down from 4.9% pace reported the month prior, and 11th consecutive month of cooling price pressure. Food prices rose 0.2%, while energy prices dropped 3.6% in May, following 0.6% gain. Year over year, the core PCI increased 5.3%, which is actually down from April's 5.5%. So the next slide, we talk about PCE. And so PCE is a measurement of consumer spending on goods and services among households in the U.S. It is also used as a mechanism to gauge how much earned income of households is being spent on current consumption of various goods and services. And as you can see the trend here, core PCE is higher than just PCE, that includes the food and energy. So that also rose by 1% in May. And it was expected, as expected, and following a 0.4 increase in April. Year over year, headline inflation increased 3.8%, also as expected, and down from 4.3% in April. So the three graphs we just looked at are all tied to inflation when we look at it, right? We're looking at the prices that consumes for consumption of goods and services. So I wanted to make sure I share this, because this is tied to how you are pricing yourself for your goods and services to absorb the increases that you have to have because prices are so high. So next, we're going to talk about the Fed. And so the Fed, each region of the country has a Fed president. They are, we have a one person who is the chair, which is Jerome Powell. And Jerome Powell leads the team, and they have the discussion. They're looking at all those factors that I just mentioned to you. And so the Fed, if you had paid attention to what happened in June, did not increase rates in June. And does anyone know why they didn't increase the rates in June, other than the young man in the suit at table 13? All right. So now, you can agree or disagree with me, which I know our representative will. It would be that there was 3 bank failures earlier this year. And the increase in rates, whether we, depending on what side you sit on, banks were feeling the pressure from all those increases, right? And so for us as financial institutions, our job is to make sure that we are able to cover our overhead, and we find different multiple ways, just like you do, to be able to do it, because we're a business just like you are, right? Unfortunately, in their case, they may have gone out a little too far in the investment side, which mainly has been affected by the rate increases by the Fed, which has then caused them to have a tightening, a shortfall, and a lack of confidence from their consumer base, which then led to their failure, right? And so, did I do okay with that, Representative? Okay, all right. So this slide here is what we call the Fed dot plot. And so this gives you an idea of what the Fed is thinking. Every dot represents a perspective of one of the Fed members. And so the green line represents where it's a medium of where they think rates will be at the end of 2023, 24, 25, and so on. As you can see, we did not have a rate increase this month. When I say this month, I mean June. However, there's a meeting that's occurring this coming week, right? And it's likely that there will be a 25 basis point hike. There's also speculation that there will be another 25 basis point hike, because the Fed's intention is to combat inflation. And if inflation goes down, then you'll start to see that they will have a peak, right? They'll stop. Can't tell you when, because inflation is the driver right now. And so once they reach their peak, historically, it would take about 7 to 9 months before you start to see rates go down. They have made a commitment that rates will be higher for longer. So that could be a little longer than what historically we have seen them do. But according to the Fed, they believe by next year, they should have 4 decreases in rate, about 25 basis points, because they're not going to take rates down as fast as they took rates up. But that's kind of what the indication looks like. And so you can kind of tell in the market how the market feels about it. And the market does have not next week, but this week's price baked in, that 25 basis points. Okay, so now that we talked about the Fed, we're gonna go on to the next question, would be a recession, right? So the question is when, right? Because historically, we have had a recession every 10 years. But we can say that we have reached an unprecedented time, as this post-COVID environment does not look the same as the pre-COVID environment. The labor workforce doesn't look the same. And so when is the question, because we know it's gonna happen, right? And so is it gonna happen by the end of this year? No, it's not likely, unless something catastrophic happens, but maybe sometime in 2024. So as we're thinking about that and knowing this information, we need to be able to prepare ourselves and be proactive in what we need to do to see if we're ready. As the young lady put it earlier, are we recession ready, right? So before we do that, I want to give us, I have a little bit of a video for us to watch, and it's on the Texas economy, because it's important that you know what's happening locally.
Hi, my name is Anil Kumar, and these are the top 3 things you need to know about the Texas economy in 60 seconds. Job growth in Texas accelerated in May and continues to outpace the nation. The Texas employment forecast for 2023 strengthened slightly to 2.8%, though the forecast implies that job growth will likely slow to a 2.2% annualized rate through year end. Despite robust job growth, layoffs are increasing. Initial jobless claims have risen in the state and now slightly exceed pre-pandemic levels. The Texas Business Outlook surveys indicate that manufacturing activity remained flat in May, while service sector growth held steady. Manufacturing new orders continue to decline, and overall business sentiment and outlooks continue to be negative. Price and wage pressures remain high, though they have moderated. With the risks associated with elevated inflation and tight monetary policy, a slowdown in the broader economy is expected in the second half of the year. Thanks for watching Texas Economy 360. For more information, visit dallasfed.org.
Okay, so what we've heard is Texas and the U.S. are having having strong growth, right? You know, so those are things we're looking at when we're talking about a recession. If we're getting close to a recession, we'll start to see things weaken and slow down a little bit more, right? Employment is still strong, is still resilient, and when that starts to get to the other side and feel a little bit different, that's when we'll start to get a little closer. GDP has been said that if you have 2 negative quarters of GDP, 2 consecutive negative quarters, then you'll start to see that we'll start to feel or be in a recession. All right. So we have our quote, without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning. So we're going to talk about the small business forecast. And so here's a quote from the chief economist for NFIB. Halfway through the year, small business owners remain very pessimistic about future business conditions and their sales prospects. Inflation and labor shortages continue to be great challenges for small businesses. Owners are still raising selling prices at inflationary levels to try to pass on high inventory, labor, and energy costs. So when we look to the next slide, it talks about the expectations of owners. So small business owners, they're expecting better business conditions in the next 6 months. 42% of owners reported job openings that are hard to fill. I don't know about you, but we've been having a hard time at the credit union trying to find people to come and fill spaces. We have about 31 available openings right now, and they're sitting there, and they've been sitting there for months. The net percent of owners who expect real sales to be higher improved by 7 points in May. And so what we see here on the other side of the screen is you see that there's an index component here. And so what I just mentioned, you'll see in the red, the plans to increase employment, optimism for that is down. You see that plans to increase inventories is down also. But what you do see is that they expect the economy to improve, that real sales will be higher, earning trends will be higher. Now is a good time to expand. So there is mixed views, but there is still optimism out there. So next we have my last quote for you, that the investor of today does not profit from yesterday's growth. So let's look at it from as a starting point, what I like to call long-term sustainability. So sustainability is crucial to every business. We need that as we go through the different business cycles. And so in the case of where we are right now in the economic cycle, we want to review and revise our business strategies. Does it still make sense? What the course that we're on right now. Could there be some changes we need to make and shift because we are in a different environment based off of the changes we've seen after COVID? Expense management. I stay on my team all the time about expense management. Luckily, no one other than Clarence is in the room that can tell you how hard I can be about expense management. Because when you look at expense management, it ties right in to focusing on your spread management. So that is the difference between your income and your expenses. And you always want that income to override those expenses. And so placing a more heavier focus on your expenses. Maybe there are some things that you have doubled up on that you don't need to. You're having 2 vendors that you don't have to have. Just really looking at those expenses to see, do they still make sense and are they needed? Is there a way that maybe I can negotiate something a little cheaper as I go through my business? Increase efficiency. There are so many changes that has happened over the years. I can talk about me being in my credit union movement for 18 years, how we used to do business versus how we do it now. We needed 10 people to run a branch before, now you don't. You go to the branch. How many of y'all have gone to a branch and you see there's one teller and you have to wait in a line, right? You gotta wait in a line because they have created efficiencies because now they have a little thing called an ITM. Well, what about you and your businesses? What efficiencies can you use in your business that cuts time, but also gives the same level or even better level of service to your consumers? Diversifying income. So I am a certified financial planner, so is Clarence. We always want to tell people that you should have multiple streams of income, right? So you have your income coming in from your business. The question is there other ways to bring in additional income from what you're doing with your business? And then, of course, build your capital for the long term. I like to think of that as a rainy day fund, right? Because when things happen, when the unforeseen happens, you need that capital to draw off of. So when you're looking at the opportunity to diversify your income, that is building into your capital. And so you want to be able to do that. And then also, you want to be open to alternative growth opportunities. And so when we talk about that, we talk about resources. And so for that, resources, Small Business Administration, the SBA, they provide programs and services for new businesses, existing businesses. So that is a way of doing that. If we can go to the next slide. And so small business, looking at that, seeing how you can gain additional resources or funds from SBA for your business. Grant money. Grant money is another way as well to make sure that you can build up that capital to be able to use that towards paying, the operating expenses you have as far as payroll. But partnering with financial institutions. Now, this is on the bank side. I want to be very clear. I work for a credit union, not a bank. So on the bank side, they have a little thing called CRA. And that CRA is money that they get for putting money out into the community. So partner with your financial institution and finding those funds, because they are looking to put that money out into the community. So that way they can help you and your business as you're helping your community thrive. And then we have the programs for small businesses. I can talk to you about ours. We have a business in the box. And Ms. Cat, if you wouldn't mind, that young man behind you, if you could give him the mic. But Clarence, can you only use a few minutes of my time to tell them about this business in the box?
Thank you, Tracy. So the business in the box idea is something that we've come up with or in the process of rolling out that will enable us to take a look at small businesses, historically marginalized businesses, business in low-income areas, that we can roll out a product that would be sort of an introductory product to get you to gain some ground, gain some traction in terms of establishing financial legitimacy for your business. We not only want to take a look at doing these loans for, we'll be working through the Chambers of Commerce. I think Ruben has established a relationship with the Ruiz family, the Ruiz business and Ruiz Financial, and we'll be working with them to sort of get this product out to those businesses that are just kind of on shaky ground, trying to get started off and need to establish credibility in the market today. It's really important that you have credentials, that you have financials that will reflect that you are a viable entity, and that if someone is going to loan money to you, there's a good probability that that money is going to be paid back. So we want to be the organization and the entity that allows you the opportunity. If you don't have that track record, we want to be able to help you establish that track record and to do it in a way that it does make a practical and a philosophical difference in your business being able to go from where you are to where you want to be or where you plan to be. Is that enough, Tracy? I can always say more.
I know you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and so just like we are at Resource One have a business in the box, there's other institutions, again, that plays on the partnering of financial institutions, right, that can help you. They have small business programs that can help you in most cases. And then funds management programs. I know we have something that we are working on in our commercial area that helps with helping you manage your funds, right? Because accounting on some levels can be a little challenging, making sure you have your invoicing together, right? And so if there is a program that you can use that can help you so then you can focus on other areas of your business, I implore you to take advantage of that. And so with that, I am done. I hope that in this conversation you had some takeaways, that there was something that you've gleaned from this that you can take back to your businesses and really kind of focus on, revamp, and use. So thank you. Thank you to the Reyes family for inviting me.